Across the galaxy, in corners where light barely reached, whispers traveled like wildfire. Stories of humans, small yet unyielding, reached planets most beings had never even heard of. Traders in distant markets, pilots in starports, and soldiers in the fleets all spoke in hushed tones about the same thing: humans were not ordinary. They were patient, clever beyond measure, and carried a hidden fury that could erupt without warning. No one truly understood where their strength came from, or why a species so young in the galaxy's timeline could inspire fear in the hearts of civilizations that had ruled the stars for thousands of years. On the edge of the Corvian sector, in a crowded bazaar that spanned several kilometers of floating platforms, a debate raged. Alien merchants from countless worlds gestured wildly, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of alien sounds. Tentacled traders from the oceanic planet Virel argued with the crystalline ambassadors of Zorath Prime, their heated gestures scattering small floating crates and merchandise. "We cannot ignore it," shouted a Virel merchant, its tentacles quivering. "Every encounter shows humans are unpredictable. Every treaty, every negotiation, they bend the rules in ways no one can predict. You have seen the reports, yes?" "Yes," replied the Zorathian diplomat, its multifaceted eyes reflecting the buzzing lights of the bazaar. "We have seen what they did to the Ataran fleet. Entire ships disappeared without a trace, yet our sensors reported nothing. No warnings, no signs. And when we tried to respond, the humans were gone, leaving only a message. One phrase that terrified everyone who read it. They are different." From a distance, the crowd of arguing aliens hardly noticed a figure stepping through the chaos. A human, dressed simply, moved slowly but deliberately. His presence was quiet yet undeniable. Where he walked, beings instinctively shifted, making way without thought. The air seemed to tense, as though the galaxy itself recognized him. He carried no weapon, no armor, no symbols of rank. Yet every species in the market instinctively knew he was not someone to be challenged lightly. The human's face was calm, almost unnervingly so. He observed the bazaar, taking in the arguments, the gestures, the frustrated murmurs. His eyes scanned the faces of aliens who had long dominated the galaxy with fleets, armies, and cunning. Some of them had seen wars that destroyed worlds, but now their expressions betrayed unease, curiosity, and a deep, instinctive caution. They had heard the stories of human patience, but seeing one in person brought a new dimension of dread. "Perhaps we overestimate them," a small, insect-like ambassador whispered to a companion. "Maybe it is just luck." Luck. The word made the human smile faintly. That smile, almost invisible, spread a chill through the surrounding crowd. Luck had nothing to do with it. Humans thrived because of discipline, cunning, and a willingness to act where others hesitated. Their patience was not weakness, it was strategy. And their fury, when provoked, was something no species wanted to encounter. He walked closer to the center of the bazaar, and the argument quieted slightly. Eyes turned, some out of curiosity, some out of fear. Aliens instinctively leaned back, creating a path without speaking. Vendors froze mid-sale, clutched their merchandise tightly, and watched. Even the sky above, where shuttles floated lazily between platforms, seemed to dim in their awareness, as though the universe had paused to take note. The Virel merchant who had been speaking so loudly swallowed, glancing at his companions nervously. Perhaps we should wait," he said, his voice shaking. "Wait and see what he wants before we continue this debate." The human stopped. Silence fell like a weight across the market. Every sound, from the clatter of goods to the hum of engines, seemed distant, muffled. He raised a hand, not in threat, but in acknowledgement. His gaze swept across the crowd, piercing through their bravado and confidence. There was no anger in his face, no excitement. Only a calm awareness, a deep understanding of the power dynamics around him. Then, in a voice that was clear and calm, but carried the weight of command and inevitability, he spoke. "Now you've really pushed it." The effect was instantaneous. Tentacles recoiled. Crystalline limbs stilled. Insectoid antennae twitched nervously. Every being in the immediate vicinity froze, not out of obedience, but instinct. The phrase was not new to them, yet hearing it directly, in the presence of the human who embodied every whispered legend, made their thoughts scatter. Stories became reality in an instant. Fear, respect, and/or coalesced into a single undeniable truth: Humans were not a species to challenge lightly. For a long moment, the human said nothing more. He simply stood, observing the reactions, letting the weight of his presence settle over the gathered aliens. Conversations that had been heated just moments before fell silent. The arguments, the boasts, the threats, all of it faded under the quiet authority of a human who needed nothing but a single sentence to assert control over the room. A small child, belonging to a species known for courage bordering on recklessness, dared to step forward, drawn by curiosity. The human's gaze met the child's, calm and measuring, but something unspoken passed between them. The child felt no fear, only understanding. This human was not just another being in the galaxy. He was a force, patient, cunning, and potentially unstoppable. Merchants slowly lowered their hands from their weapons and tools. Diplomats adjusted their posture, some out of shame for underestimating the humans, others out of or at the calm confidence they radiated. Traders who had risked their lives crossing war zones reconsidered their assumptions about humans. Everyone, even those who had scoffed at rumors, now understood that humans carried a power beyond brute force, an ability to command attention, respect, and fear, simply by existing and speaking at the right moment. In the background, small screens and communication devices transmitted images and data of the humans' arrival to countless locations across the galaxy. Observers in command centers paused their routines. Fleet admirals, politicians, and scholars who had debated for centuries now had a single, unanimous reaction. Humans were not a species to be trifled with. Not yet. But perhaps soon, if provoked, they could be the most dangerous force any civilization had ever faced. The human walked slowly through the bazaar, eyes scanning the crowd, noting reactions, reading subtle cues in posture and expression. He spoke nothing more. He did not need to. The simple phrase he had spoken carried centuries of implied history, unspoken lessons, and warnings of potential consequences that could ripple across light years. It was a statement that demanded attention, respect, and compliance without direct aggression. By the time he reached the edge of the bazaar and prepared to leave, the market was transformed. Aliens who had been loud, confident, and argumentative moments before now exchanged nervous glances, hesitant to speak, fearful of provoking him or any human who might follow. Traders quietly moved aside to clear a path, and even the more belligerent species bowed their heads slightly in acknowledgement. The human's presence, though transient, had left a mark deeper than any fleet, weapon, or law could achieve. As he stepped onto a small shuttle, preparing to depart for unknown destinations, whispers resumed, but now they were different. No longer speculative or questioning, they were statements of fact, stories that would be passed down for generations. That human, a trader murmured. He said it once, and the galaxy listened. And as the shuttle lifted off, disappearing into the star-filled sky, the bazaar slowly returned to its routines. Yet something had changed. Every being there, from the smallest vendor to the highest-ranking diplomat, carried the memory of that moment. A human had arrived quietly, had observed patiently, and with a single phrase, had reminded the galaxy that no species could predict, challenge, or outrun the force that was humanity. Across systems, the story spread. Reports came in from observers, scouts, and travelers. The phrase repeated itself across countless worlds, "Now you've really pushed it." It was no longer just words. It was a warning, a marker of human patience and hidden fury, and a prelude to a future where the galaxy would learn, again and again, that humans were not ordinary. They were patient, cunning, and quietly dangerous. By the end of that day, across star systems and through countless comms, the story of the human ambassador's arrival became legend. Ships carried the tale across light years. Children on distant planets whispered it in curiosity. Admirals, diplomats, and scholars reflected on it with awe. And somewhere, in the calm silence of space, the human watched, knowing that the galaxy had begun to understand, just a little, what it truly meant when a human said, "Now you've really pushed it." The galaxy was quiet in places where it should have been loud. Silence stretched across the edges of the Harnack cluster, where a research station floated alone against the endless black, blinking softly with lights that marked it as a hub of knowledge and observation. It was here that alien scientists, scholars, and strategists had gathered, determined to study humans closely. They were fascinated, yes, but more than that, they were terrified. Stories had spread across civilizations about the patience and fury of humans, and now they wanted proof. They wanted to understand the limits of a species that had outsmarted fleets, survived disasters, and yet remained unpredictable. Inside the station, a series of chambers hummed with activity. Screens displayed distant planets, star systems, and human colonies. Alien scientists argued, gestured, and whispered constantly. "If we provoke them carefully, we can learn their true limits," said one, a tentacled officer from Virel. Its voice shook slightly despite the calm it tried to show. "We do not attack openly. That would be madness. But small, controlled tests, yes, small tests to see how they react." Another scientist, a crystalline being whose body refracted light like a prism, clicked its limbs nervously. "And if they respond too strongly," it asked, "we could lose entire fleets. Entire stations. This is not a species to toy with lightly." The Virel officer leaned back, its tentacles coiling around the console. "We are careful. Calculated. Nothing more." Yet, even as it spoke, the unease was clear. The legends were real. Humans were not ordinary beings. They were quiet before the storm, calm before the fury. And once that fury was unleashed, it could consume everything. Far below, on a small observation deck, human representatives stood silently. There were only a few of them, but their presence alone carried a weight that made the aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. They spoke no words. They moved no hands. They simply observed, their eyes scanning every detail, every motion, every expression of their alien counterparts. Each twitch, each whisper, was recorded, analyzed, and understood in an instant. The aliens began their test carefully. First, subtle challenges, miscommunications, small offenses, deliberate irritations. A holographic display would flicker during a human presentation, or an alien researcher would make a statement questioning human intelligence. Every act was minor, almost imperceptible, meant only to gauge reaction. The humans did not respond in anger. They did not raise their voices. They remained calm, even friendly, as though the tiny provocations were nothing, as though patience was infinite and fury would come only at the perfect moment. But the atmosphere shifted when one alien, arrogant and impatient, stepped further than intended. It challenged a human directly, mocking their intelligence, laughing as if the human could not possibly notice. The gesture was small. The words were simple. But the effect was instantaneous. The human's eyes focused on the alien with a quiet intensity that made the room shiver. Time seemed to slow. Hearts raced. Tentacles twitched. Crystalline limbs shimmered nervously. Antennae flexed in alarm. Every being present sensed that the balance had shifted. The human stepped forward slowly, deliberately. There was no rage in the movement. No violence. Yet every instinct of every alien told them to flee, to step back, to leave immediately. The calm in the human's posture was more terrifying than any scream, more powerful than any weapon. It was patience fused with certainty, a quiet force that needed no expression other than its own presence. And then the human spoke. Just one sentence. Clear. Calm. Unyielding. "Now you've really pushed it." It was as though the air itself trembled. The alien who had mocked them froze mid-gesture, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The sound, the tone, the absolute certainty behind the words carried an invisible weight that pressed down on the entire room. Some species' hearts raced, others faltered in their steps. For the first time, the alien scientists realized that the stories had been true. Humans did not need weapons to strike fear. They did not need fleets to command obedience. A single phrase, spoken at the right time, could bend the galaxy's will, change the course of battles, and leave the most confident beings questioning their own intelligence. Yet, even as tension gripped the room, a strange emotion passed through the human. It was not hatred. It was not anger. It was something deeper, something almost tragic in its restraint. Humans could unleash fury, yes, but they did not do so for vanity or pride. They waited, they observed, they measured. And when the moment came, when the line was crossed, they struck not with chaos, but with purpose, with precision, with inevitability. The alien observers stared in disbelief, but also in a reluctant awe. They had prepared calculations, simulations, and strategies for every imaginable human reaction. And yet, they had been utterly unprepared for this simple, quiet, devastating moment. The human did not shout. The human did not act rashly. The human did not even raise a hand. One sentence, one look, and the room was changed forever. In that instant, a new understanding spread silently across the station. Humans were not reckless warriors. They were not impulsive fighters. They were creatures of patience and observation, carrying a fury that waited in the shadows, quiet, unseen, but limitless. And when provoked, when truly pushed, that fury would rise like a storm that could not be stopped. The alien who had tested the human first swallowed nervously. It backed away slowly, eyes wide. Others around it did the same, moving instinctively, as if the human's calm command had pressed on nerves that no words or weapons could touch. For the first time, they realized that their knowledge of the galaxy, their experience with thousands of civilizations, was not enough. Humans were beyond their comprehension. And the human did not strike. Not yet. There was no sudden explosion, no instant retribution. The room remained quiet, almost reverent, as if the very walls of the station recognized the force present. It was a quiet, emotional moment, filled with tension, with awe, with the knowledge that the galaxy had underestimated a species for centuries. From the observation decks, other humans watched silently, their expressions calm but their hearts aware of the gravity of the situation. They did not need to intervene. The human who had spoken alone embodied the truth that every species would eventually learn. Humans were patient, humans were cunning, and humans could hold a fury that no one dared provoke. As the test concluded, the aliens remained shaken. Even after the human left the chamber, after footsteps faded and screens returned to routine displays, the emotional impact lingered. Scientists whispered in low tones, their calculations forgotten. Strategists rubbed their limbs nervously, their previous confidence shattered. And somewhere, deep inside, every observer understood that humans were not a force to be challenged lightly. The quiet fury of humanity, restrained yet inevitable, had been demonstrated in a single moment. One sentence, one presence, had changed the understanding of everyone in that station. The galaxy might one day know fear, but today, the lesson was clear: humans did not need weapons to command attention. They did not need armies to impose will. They simply needed the right moment, the patience to wait, and the understanding that when pushed too far, the human response would be absolute, precise, and unforgettable. And as the humans departed the station, leaving silence in their wake, the alien observers began to speak quietly among themselves, voices trembling, realizing the truth: the legends had underestimated humans. The patience, the cunning, the hidden fury, it was real. And when it finally erupted, the galaxy would never forget. Across the void, whispers of that day traveled faster than any fleet. Reports reached capitals and war rooms, where admirals and politicians, scholars and generals, repeated the phrase again and again, each time with a mix of awe and fear: now you've really pushed it. It was no longer a warning, no longer just words, it was proof of human restraint, intelligence, and unstoppable potential. The galaxy had seen the first test. It had felt the quiet tension, the emotional weight, the inevitability of human fury. And for the first time, even the most confident beings realized that humans were not ordinary, not predictable, not conquerable. Humans were a force of nature, patient and hidden, and one day, when pushed, their fury would sweep across the stars like a storm that no being could escape. Across the outer systems, beyond the edge of mapped space, the first warning arrived. The Ataran fleet, the pride of the Malarian coalition, had set course toward a human colony, confident in their superiority. Hundreds of massive warships, their hulls bristling with energy cannons, shields, and missile arrays, moved like a tidal wave through the void. They had been sent to demonstrate power, to enforce control over a species the galaxy considered young, untested, and reckless. Every officer on the bridges of those ships expected little resistance, nothing more than token opposition before the humans surrendered. They expected a quick, predictable engagement. The humans did not surrender. They did not retreat. They did not panic. On the surface of the colony, and in orbit around it, humans moved with calm precision. Small ships launched quietly, seemingly weak, their numbers deceptive. Ground defenses shimmered with advanced energy fields, but nothing about their deployment suggested panic or haste. Their movements were deliberate, methodical, like a predator studying its prey, calculating each response before action. As the Ataran flagship moved closer, its commander laughed, a cold, confident sound that carried across the comm network. They cannot hope to match us. Their weapons are primitive. Their tactics are amateur. We will crush them and send a warning across the stars. Humanity will learn its place. His words were meant to inspire his crew, but beneath them lingered the first faint tremor of doubt. Even seasoned officers, trained for decades in the art of war, felt it, a subtle hesitation, a shadow of unease they could not explain. And then it began. The first missile salvo fired from the Ataran fleet met nothing but silence. Human sensors tracked the incoming weapons, calculated trajectories, and responded with precision that seemed impossible. The missiles disappeared before reaching the colony, diverted or destroyed by small, unassuming craft whose size alone seemed incapable of such feats. The fleet's communications buzzed with confusion. Officers shouted, recalculated, tried to identify targets. Every calculation failed. Every prediction was wrong. From orbit, human commanders observed silently. Their eyes scanned the holographic displays, analyzing enemy positions, velocities, and weaknesses. There was no haste, no panic, no emotion on their faces. Only focus, patience, and a deadly understanding. When the moment was right, humans acted, not with reckless aggression, but with strategies that bent the laws of physics to their advantage. Suddenly, one Ataran ship exploded without warning. Not a single weapon had visibly struck it, yet it disintegrated in a cascade of fire and energy. Shock waves rippled through nearby vessels, throwing inexperienced crews into panic. The human fleet had anticipated every move, every possible attack, and had countered before the Atarans even realized they were under threat. Confidence turned to fear. Fear turned to chaos. On the surface, humans moved silently, ensuring civilians were safe, yet their defensive positions allowed no breaches. Alien scouts who had attempted to infiltrate the colony found themselves trapped in invisible fields, or immobilized by mechanisms they could not understand. Panic spread through their ranks as the humans, quiet and calm, controlled every action and reaction with terrifying efficiency. The Ataran flagship's commander, desperate to regain control, ordered a concentrated assault. Thousands of ships fired simultaneously, hoping sheer numbers would overwhelm the human defenses. But humans had calculated every angle, every timing, every possibility. Small attack craft, invisible until the last moment, emerged from unexpected vectors, disabling engines, intercepting weapons, and neutralizing communications. Within moments, the assault became a trap. The fleet's own firepower turned against them, their formations collapsing under human tactics that seemed chaotic but were perfectly precise. Amid the chaos, a human commander addressed the entire colony via broadcast, their voice calm but carrying authority that cut through panic. "Now you've really pushed it." The phrase echoed across comms, clear, steady, and terrifying in its simplicity. On the bridges of Ataran ships, crew members froze mid-action, their hands hovering over controls. They had heard the stories, but now they were seeing the reality. It was not the size of humans, not the number of ships, not even the weapons. It was the intelligence, the foresight, the complete lack of hesitation in the face of overwhelming odds. Humans did not just survive, they controlled the battlefield without chaos, without noise, without visible force. Explosions tore through the space above the colony, but always under human control. Every strike against them was anticipated and neutralized. Every attempt to advance was redirected into a trap. And all the while, humans moved calmly, silently, their faces serene, their eyes watching, calculating, waiting for the moment when retaliation would be exact and devastating. By the time the Ataran fleet realized their mistake, it was too late. Ships disintegrated in rapid succession, entire wings trapped by unseen forces. Panic turned into despair, and despair into surrender, but humans did not rejoice. They did not celebrate. They simply maintained order, ensuring no unnecessary casualties and leaving the enemy to reflect on their arrogance. The colony itself was untouched, as if the human defenders had moved through the chaos with invisible hands. Citizens emerged, unafraid, looking up at the stars as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. And yet, to any observer who understood the scale of the battle, it was extraordinary. A fleet of hundreds of ships had been neutralized without the humans breaking a sweat, without losing a single life unnecessarily, without a single reckless move. In the command center of the human fleet, the lead officer stood silently, watching the aftermath. He did not smile. He did not shout orders. He simply observed, knowing that every eye across the galaxy, from ally to enemy, was now focused on humanity. The lesson had been delivered. Humans were not a species to be underestimated. They were patient, precise, and when provoked, they could unleash a force so controlled and devastating that entire fleets were powerless. Reports spread immediately. Observers in nearby systems transmitted data, images, and warnings to distant civilizations. The phrase repeated across transmissions, whispered in fear and awe, "Now you've really pushed it." Entire fleets halted their movements, diplomats reconsidered negotiations, and scholars re-evaluated centuries of knowledge about humans. One simple moment, one battle, had changed the perception of a species across light years. The human commander finally spoke again, this time softly, to no one in particular. "Let them remember this," he said. "Let them understand that patience is not weakness, and fury is not chaos. We do not strike blindly, but we strike with certainty. And when pushed, we will respond." Across the galaxy, whispers turned to stories, stories turned to legends, and legends began to shape the policies, fears, and ambitions of entire civilizations. Humanity had not conquered through brute force. They had conquered through strategy, patience, and an unshakable calm that no other species could predict. And for the first time, the galaxy understood, humans were not a threat to be measured by numbers or weapons. They were a force defined by their intelligence, their restraint, and the quiet certainty that when pushed too far, they would respond with precision and inevitability. In the aftermath of the battle, the stars seemed different. The void felt heavier, as if the universe itself had taken note. Human ships quietly returned to their posts, humans on the colony resumed normal life, and the galaxy slowly absorbed the lesson. The stories would be told over and over, each recounting carrying the same chilling phrase, growing in resonance with every retelling, "Now you've really pushed it." No one would forget the first battle. No species would ever challenge humans lightly again. And somewhere, far from the edge of known space, humans observed, patient, silent, knowing that the galaxy had only begun to understand the storm that could come from restraint, cunning, and the hidden fury of their kind. The galaxy had not yet recovered from the first battle. Stories of the human colony's defense, the sudden disappearance of enemy ships, and the calm, precise fury of humanity traveled faster than any fleet could. Every civilization spoke in whispers, in awe and fear. Plans changed, treaties were reconsidered, and fleets hesitated before making any aggressive moves. Humanity had demonstrated patience, cunning, and a power that required no weapons, only precision and strategy. Yet, some among the galaxy's leaders were stubborn, unwilling to believe a species so young could command such respect. They decided to test the humans again, this time with diplomacy, with negotiation, but the outcome would teach a lesson far more profound than any battle could. In the grand chamber of the Interstellar Council, representatives of countless species had gathered. Their ships orbited a neutral planet, their delegates convening in a massive domed structure of polished metal and glass, glittering under artificial lights that simulated a pale sun. The room hummed with tension. Every species had brought its best negotiators, diplomats trained for centuries, masters of manipulation, rhetoric, and subtle threats. They were confident. They believed that words, logic, and intimidation could bend humans to their will. At the center of the chamber, a single human arrived. No entourage, no guards, no visible power, just one human ambassador. The room fell silent immediately. The sound of shifting chairs, scuttling feet, and muttered calculations ceased. Even seasoned negotiators, those who had brokered peace and war across thousands of star systems, felt a shiver run through their spines. The human walked slowly, deliberately, scanning every delegate, measuring every expression, noting every twitch and flicker of emotion. The calmness in their posture, the patience in their eyes, the subtle confidence that radiated from them, these were things the galaxy had never learned to measure. The alien diplomats tried to maintain composure. They raised voices, made formal statements, offered contracts, demanded concessions. But the human did not react. They listened, their face a mask of serene patience, their silence amplifying the weight of their presence. Every word the alien spoke, every argument, every threat, was absorbed and analyzed in seconds. And yet, nothing slipped. There was no reaction of anger, no sign of impatience, only an unwavering calm that unnerved even the most confident delegates. Hours passed. The discussions turned heated. Alien species began raising their voices, accusing each other of being naive, of underestimating humanity. They tried to provoke the human, making subtle insults, questioning the intelligence and authority of a species they still could not fully comprehend. One ambassador, an insectoid with gleaming armor-like skin, leaned forward and sneered, "Humans are young. They cannot understand galactic politics. They will break under pressure." The human's eyes focused on the insectoid. Nothing about their expression changed, but in that quiet gaze was a message that resonated across the room. Patience is not weakness, observation is not hesitation, and fury, when released, is absolute. The other delegates noticed it, some trembling subtly, others frozen in disbelief. The human's presence, calm and unyielding, carried the same invisible weight that had stopped entire fleets in their tracks during the first battle. Minutes turned into hours. Alien negotiators tried every tactic. They demanded territory, resources, and compliance. They offered gifts, promises, threats, even veiled warnings of military action. The human listened. They allowed each tactic to play out fully, never interrupting, never showing impatience, never betraying the storm that simmered beneath the calm exterior. It was the patience of centuries condensed into a single individual, the kind of patience that waited for the exact moment, the perfect time, to strike, not with weapons, but with inevitability. Then came the final test. A representative from the Zorathians, a crystalline species that had long dominated trade and diplomacy, stood and issued a formal ultimatum. "If humans do not agree to our demands, we will declare sanctions, blockade your colonies, and enforce compliance by force. You have until the end of this cycle to respond." The council chamber grew tense. Some species looked to the human for a reaction, expecting panic, fear, or hasty agreement. Others prepared to celebrate the anticipated human submission. The human did not move. They did not blink. Silence filled the chamber like a tangible weight. All calculations, all predictions, all strategies of the assembled diplomats fell apart in that moment. The calm intensity in the human's eyes, the slow and deliberate posture, communicated a certainty no one had anticipated. The universe seemed to pause, as if acknowledging the invisible power in that patience, the quiet understanding that humans waited not because they feared, but because they knew exactly when and how to act. Then the words came, soft but carrying authority that echoed in every mind, across every species, through every nervous thought, "Now you've really pushed it." The effect was instantaneous. Tentacles recoiled, crystalline limbs shimmered nervously, antennae twitched in alarm. Even seasoned diplomats froze mid-sentence. The calm certainty of that one phrase carried an emotional weight no weapon could deliver. It was patience turned into inevitability. It was history, strategy, and instinct fused into a single moment. It was a warning that humans were not a species to be coerced, manipulated, or underestimated. The insectoid ambassador, the one who had sneered, took a step back. Its mandibles clicked nervously. Other delegates shifted in their chairs, their eyes wide. Whispers broke out, low, fearful, reverent whispers. "Do you see?" one muttered. "This is the species we underestimated." "They are different," another said. "We have pushed too far." The human remained calm, allowing the emotional tension to settle over the room. Not because they wanted to intimidate, but because they understood the lesson needed to be learned fully. Humans did not strike out of emotion, but they allowed the weight of their presence, their patience, and the inevitability of their fury to teach the galaxy what it meant to test them. Hours later, when the negotiations formally ended, the human left the chamber without a single raised voice, without a single aggressive act. And yet, the entire council was changed. Not by force, not by firepower, not by coercion, but by patience, observation, and the quiet, emotional impact of a species that would not be rushed, cajoled, or bullied. Every species in the chamber had learned a lesson in fear, respect, and awe that would not soon fade. Outside, the galaxy buzzed with the tale. Stories spread of the human negotiator who had faced hundreds of alien delegates and walked away unshaken, leaving a room full of leaders in awe and fear. Across star systems, the same phrase traveled from ear to ear, message to message, growing in resonance, growing in legend, "Now you've really pushed it." And somewhere, in the quiet corridors of the human ship, the negotiator observed, patient, calm, letting the galaxy process its own fear. They knew that the lesson had been delivered. The galaxy had learned that humans were not just a species of strength, they were a species of patience, calculation, and hidden fury. And the emotional weight of that realization would echo across the stars long after the human had left. The galaxy would remember this negotiation. They would remember the calm, the restraint, the inevitability. And when humans acted again, when truly provoked, every being would understand. There was no escaping, no bargaining, and no misjudging the force that waited quietly beneath the surface. Humanity had spoken once more, and the galaxy had listened. The galaxy was tense. Word of the human negotiators' presence, their calm fury, and the inevitable lesson they had delivered spread faster than any fleet could travel. Entire civilizations hesitated before acting, recalculating, re-evaluating their assumptions. And yet, some factions were stubborn, some arrogant, and some desperate enough to believe they could challenge humans without consequence. That arrogance, that underestimation, would soon collide with reality in the most shocking way. A massive coalition of alien civilizations, drawn from the farthest corners of known space, gathered in orbit around a neutral star. Their fleets numbered in the thousands, their ships bristling with weapons and defensive arrays designed to overwhelm any opposition. They were confident. They believed humans were clever, yes, but only clever enough to delay the inevitable. This was their chance to finally assert control, to make a young species kneel before the galaxy. They called it the final test, a demonstration of force meant to intimidate and destroy if necessary. But the humans did not retreat. From a distant system, human fleets began to emerge, quiet, deliberate, almost imperceptible at first. Small ships moved in formations that seemed random, yet every angle, every movement, every trajectory was calculated with precision. Ground forces on human colonies synchronized with orbital units, creating a network of control that allowed no weakness, no surprise, no breach. Their calm was absolute. Their patience unshakable. They waited, observing the coalition's movements, their strategies, their assumptions, their arrogance. The alien commanders laughed at first, mocking the human forces as insignificant, thinking their numbers, their weaponry, and their experience would crush the humans instantly. Yet as hours passed, confusion spread. Missile volleys were intercepted before they launched. Strategic formations collapsed without human ships firing a single visible shot. Entire assault units disappeared, trapped in fields that bent physics as no alien engineer had expected. Panic flickered in eyes and minds that had never known fear. The human commander on the bridge of the flagship watched silently, expression calm, eyes sharp and measuring. They did not shout orders. They did not gesture frantically. Their presence alone carried authority. They understood the coalition's arrogance, their impatience, their fatal mistake of underestimating a species that thrived on observation, patience, and precise timing. Humans did not act impulsively. Humans did not strike blindly. They acted when the moment was perfect, when the result would be absolute, when the lesson would be unforgettable. And then, when the coalition was fully committed, when every ship and every weapon was exposed in a pattern the humans had anticipated, they struck, not with chaos, not with mindless fury, but with perfection. Small human ships appeared in unexpected vectors, invisible to sensors until it was too late. Energy fields shifted, redirecting enemy fire into empty space, while simultaneously creating traps that immobilized entire sections of the fleet. Communications were disrupted, leaving coalition commanders isolated, unable to coordinate, unable to adapt. Panic spread like wildfire. Ships collided. Missiles detonated prematurely. Systems overloaded. In the calm presence of the human fleet, the coalition realized something terrifying. Their plans had been anticipated, every move countered, every assumption shattered. On the planet below, civilians watched calmly. Humans moved with quiet precision, ensuring no lives were lost unnecessarily. Engineers, soldiers, and pilots worked as one, their actions synchronized in ways that seemed impossible. Their patience, their restraint, their unshakable calm was as much a weapon as the technology they wielded. They were not reckless. They were not motivated by pride. They were motivated by understanding, by strategy, by the certainty that when provoked, they would act decisively, and the galaxy would take note. The coalition fleet, disoriented and demoralized, attempted to regroup. But every action they took was anticipated. The humans moved like shadows, invisible, untouchable, but always present, always ready. Ships vanished into empty space only to reappear behind enemy lines. Missiles exploded in midair, their energy redirected toward the source. Fleet formations dissolved, chaos spreading faster than command structures could recover. In the center of it all, the human commander transmitted a message across the coalition networks. Calm. Clear. Resonant. Now you've really pushed it. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Even those who had not heard the phrase before felt it. Hearts raced. Minds faltered. Confidence crumbled. The calm authority behind the words was more powerful than any weapon. The humans were not merely fighting, they were teaching a lesson in patience, in precision, in restraint, in the inevitability of their power when pushed too far. Alien commanders realized their fatal mistake. This was not just a battle for territory or resources. This was a revelation. The humans had shown them, without shouting, without chaos, that the galaxy had underestimated the wrong species. They had assumed numbers, weaponry, and experience could overpower humanity. They had assumed arrogance, underestimation, and ignorance would win. They had been wrong. Every calculation, every strategy, every expectation had failed. The human fleet continued its movements with deliberate calm. Not a single ship was lost. Not a single civilian harmed. The humans acted with precision, their fury controlled, their patience unbroken, until the coalition fleet had no choice but to retreat, leaving their ambitions shattered and their pride destroyed. The battlefield was not filled with screams or fires. It was filled with silent awe. Entire species, watching from a distance, recorded every moment, whispering the words that would echo across light years, "Now you've really pushed it." The aftermath was emotional. Leaders of alien fleets bowed, not in submission, but in reluctant acknowledgement of a force they could not comprehend. Citizens on neutral worlds whispered the stories of the humans who had faced overwhelming odds and emerged untouched, unshaken, unbroken. Scholars debated what they had witnessed, realizing centuries of study had underestimated humanity at every turn. And far from the battle, in the quiet of space, the human commander observed the galaxy's reaction, patient, calm, knowing that the lesson had been delivered. Humanity had not conquered with weapons alone. They had conquered with understanding, with patience, with emotional intelligence that the galaxy had never seen before. They had demonstrated that true strength lay not in power, but in restraint, in observation, in waiting for the exact moment to act, and when provoked, they struck with inevitability. And the galaxy would remember this. Every fleet, every diplomat, every observer would carry the memory of that day. The phrase would echo through space, repeated across systems, across civilizations, a warning, a legend, and a lesson. Now you've really pushed it. The humans had faced their first true coalition challenge, and they had proven, once again, that no species, no matter how vast or experienced, could match their patience, their cunning, or their quiet, controlled fury. The stars seemed to shine differently after that day, as if even the universe had taken note of humanity's power. Somewhere, far from the front lines, the human commander finally allowed a faint smile, not of pride, but of understanding. The galaxy had learned, painfully and emotionally, what it truly meant to provoke humanity. And the lesson would resonate across light years for generations to come. The galaxy was quiet in the hours after the coalition's defeat. News traveled faster than any ship, carried by signals, whispers, and rumors across light years. Humans had faced impossible numbers, outsmarted fleets, and yet suffered no loss that the galaxy could see. Every observer, every diplomat, every fleet commander understood a chilling truth. Humans were not just strong, clever, or lucky, they were something entirely different. But few truly understood why. Deep in a hidden archive on the edges of known space, an alien historian pored over records, logs, and recovered transmissions from centuries past. Their species had always prided itself on knowledge, on keeping meticulous accounts of every civilization it encountered. But even they felt a growing unease as the fragments of human history unfolded. Humans had survived planetary disasters, wars with predatory species, environmental collapse, and internal strife, yet they had thrived, learned, and adapted each time. Their resilience was astonishing. Their cunning, frightening. And now, with the first battle and the coalition's failure, the historian realized, humans had been underestimated for centuries, and the galaxy had no idea what lay beneath their patience. On a human colony orbiting a distant sun, civilians moved about their daily lives as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Children played in parks, adults tended to tasks, and traders bargained over goods. To any observer, it seemed calm, ordinary, and peaceful. But beneath the surface, a quiet network of intelligence, strategy, and discipline had been guiding every human action for centuries. Humans were patient, yes, but every decision, every choice, every observation was part of a long-term plan, one that the galaxy had only glimpsed in moments like the first battle. A young alien observer, assigned to the human colony for study, recorded every detail with trembling hands. How can a species so ordinary in appearance command such fear? They whispered to themselves. How can they remain calm while fleets crumble, while enemies panic, while their worlds are threatened, and yet they do not falter? Their eyes filled with a mixture of awe and fear as they watched humans perform acts that seemed simple, coordinating defenses, deploying ships, maintaining civilian life, but were, in truth, the culmination of centuries of discipline, observation, and understanding. On the bridge of the human flagship, the lead officer stared at a holographic map of the galaxy. Every fleet, every diplomatic station, every minor encounter with alien species was recorded, calculated, and understood. They did not act rashly. They did not strike without cause. They waited. They observed. And when provoked, when the galaxy made a mistake, they acted with precision, with inevitability. The historian watching from afar realized that humans were not just a force of patience, they were a force of foresight, strategy, and hidden power. The emotional weight of this revelation struck the observer like a shockwave. Every report from human history, every story, every legend, was now understood not as exaggeration, but as evidence of a species whose calm masked an unfathomable depth of ability. The humans had survived everything, yet every act of survival had been an opportunity to learn, to improve, to prepare for a moment the galaxy could not predict. Every miscalculation by other species had been observed and stored, a quiet advantage that humans would use only when necessary. On a distant planet, the coalition fleets regrouped, their commanders haunted by memories of the battle. They had expected chaos, disorder, or panic. Instead, they had faced calm, precision, and inevitability. The humans had not merely defended, they had taught. Every ship lost, every maneuver anticipated, every strategy countered was a lesson in patience, observation, and restrained fury. The galaxy realized for the first time that human patience was not weakness, and their calm was not passivity. It was preparation. It was power. Back on the human colony, the citizens had long been trained to act as one, to observe, to adapt, and to survive. They did not need to witness the galaxy's fear to understand it. They knew the lesson had been delivered. They did not celebrate. They did not gloat. They merely continued their work, their actions quiet but deliberate, their eyes always scanning, always measuring. The human spirit, forged over centuries of struggle, was calm yet unbreakable, precise yet adaptive, patient yet ready to strike at the exact moment. The young alien historian continued to read, each page and transmission revealing deeper truths. Humans had endured wars with predators whose technology surpassed anything the galaxy had known. They had survived planetary collapses, environmental disasters, and internal conflicts that should have destroyed them. Yet each time, they emerged stronger, smarter, more precise, more patient. And now, after facing fleets designed to crush them, the historian understood something terrifying. Humans were not unpredictable because they acted irrationally. They were unpredictable because they acted with perfect calculation, timing, and restraint. The galaxy could not anticipate humans because no one had ever seen the full scale of their patience and strategy. The historian's hands shook. They are something else, they murmured. Not just clever, not just resilient. They are inevitable. Across the room, other scholars glanced nervously. For the first time, centuries of study, analysis, and experience seemed insufficient. Humans had hidden themselves in plain sight, waiting, observing, preparing for a moment the galaxy had only now begun to comprehend. And then came the phrase, repeated across countless transmissions from human colonies, human fleets, and human commanders, "Now you've really pushed it." It was not a threat in the traditional sense. It was a declaration. It was the calm before action, the inevitability of consequence, the emotional weight of restraint that no species had experienced before. Every species hearing it, every fleet, every diplomat, every observer, felt the same mix of awe, fear, and understanding. Humans were patient, cunning, and quietly unstoppable. The galaxy had finally glimpsed the truth. Humans were not just survivors. They were thinkers, strategists, and warriors in ways no one could measure with fleets or weapons alone. Their fury was hidden, restrained, and controlled, but when released, it would be absolute, precise, and unforgettable. Every species, every fleet, every council would remember this revelation for generations. They had underestimated humanity. They had miscalculated, and now the emotional and strategic weight of that mistake hung over them like a shadow across the stars. On the bridge of the flagship, the human commander remained silent, observing, calculating, and waiting. The galaxy had seen their patience, their control, and their fury, but even now, it did not see the full depth of humanity. It never would, because humans did not need the galaxy to understand them fully. They only needed to wait, to act at the perfect moment, and to let the inevitability of their response teach the lesson that no fleet, no council, and no species could forget. Across light years, the phrase echoed again, whispered in fear and awe, spreading across civilizations like a warning that transcended borders, fleets, and politics. Now you've really pushed it. It carried with it the truth of human patience, the emotional weight of their restraint, and the chilling promise that the galaxy had only begun to learn what it truly meant to provoke humanity. The revelation was complete. The galaxy would never see humans the same way again. They were no longer just another species, another civilization among many. They were a force of nature, patient, cunning, and quietly, emotionally, terrifying. And somewhere, quietly, far from the eyes of the galaxy, humans watched, ready, knowing that the lesson had been delivered, and that one day, when truly pushed, their response would be absolute, precise, and unforgettable. The galaxy was changing. Stories of human patience, cunning, and the quiet inevitability of their response had spread across star systems. Fleets hesitated before moving. Diplomats reconsidered negotiations. Every species feared the hidden depth of humanity, yet arrogance and greed still lingered in the hearts of some. They believed they could deceive humans, betray them, and claim victory. They thought that the calm, the restraint, and the calculated patience humans displayed were weaknesses to exploit. In the Veyrath system, a coalition of alien factions had formed, secretly plotting to strike at a human-controlled outpost. They believed humans would be distracted, that their fleets would be thin, and that their patience had limits. The plan was simple: isolate the outpost, sever communications, and take control before humans could respond. The coalition commanders whispered to each other in confidence, smug in the knowledge that no human would anticipate such a betrayal. They had miscalculated. They had made the same mistake countless others had before them. The outpost appeared peaceful from afar, calm in its orbit around a rocky moon. Human ships patrolled silently, unthreatening, their movements almost casual. Civilians moved about their daily routines, unaware of the approaching danger, or so the coalition thought. The alien attackers advanced, confident and aggressive, their numbers overwhelming by every standard of conventional warfare. But the humans were not unaware. Every sensor, every patrol, every scanning device had already identified the coalition's movements, predicted their formation, and calculated their strategy. There was no panic, no rush, no chaos. The humans waited, observing, calculating, preparing for the exact moment when the betrayal would reveal itself. Patience was their weapon, precision their shield, and inevitability their sword. The first strike came, as the coalition believed it would. A small fleet of ships entered the outpost's orbit, attempting to block reinforcements, cut off escape routes, and disable defenses. The human commander did nothing visibly. Civilians continued their work. Engineers maintained shields. Pilots went through pre-flight checks. And then, when the coalition fully committed, the humans acted. Without warning, the alien ships were trapped. Small, nearly invisible human vessels moved with precision from every angle. Energy nets and gravitational fields immobilized the coalition's ships, preventing maneuvering or escape. Communications failed. Sensors were blinded. The coalition's attack, once confident and deliberate, turned into chaos. Every move they attempted had already been anticipated, calculated, and countered. Every opening they sought had been closed before they even knew it existed. On the bridge of the human flagship, the lead officer observed silently. There was no shouting, no frantic orders, only calm, measured decisions. Every reaction from the aliens was predicted, every attempt to escape countered with flawless precision. Humans did not act in anger, but the weight of inevitability pressed down on the coalition as heavily as the strongest weapon. They had betrayed trust, underestimated patience, and now faced the consequences. The emotional impact on the coalition was immediate. Confusion, panic, fear, and disbelief swept through the ranks. The aliens had relied on surprise and treachery, thinking humans would falter under deception. Instead, the humans had turned the betrayal back on them. Ships collided, weapons misfired, and entire sections of the attacking fleet were neutralized without the humans firing a single visible shot. It was a demonstration of intellect and strategy so precise, so inevitable, that it left the coalition reeling in silence, unable to comprehend how they had been outmaneuvered. In the center of it all, the human commander finally spoke, the words calm yet heavy with authority, "Now you've really pushed it." The simple phrase carried an emotional weight far beyond its sound. It was patience, restraint, and inevitability, all wrapped in one. It was a warning to the galaxy, a lesson to the betrayers, and a statement that humans did not forgive, did not forget, and did not act rashly, but when provoked by treachery, they responded with precision and inevitability that no one could resist. The coalition attempted to regroup, but their efforts were futile. Every maneuver was anticipated. Every retreat was cut off. Humans moved silently, invisibly, yet with such precision that the betrayers realized too late that they were trapped. Their own strategy turned against them. Fleet after fleet fell into disarray. Panic became despair. Confident leaders were paralyzed, their arrogance shattered by the simple but overwhelming force of calculated human response. On the planet below, humans moved with quiet purpose. Civilians were safe, unaware of the danger above them, as the human forces managed the betrayal with calm authority. Engineers reinforced shields, pilots guided transport, and every unit, from the smallest scout to the flagship, acted as one. There was no chaos, no emotion-driven reaction, only calculated precision. The human response was flawless, controlled, and emotionally devastating for the betrayers. As the battle concluded, the coalition had suffered heavy losses. Ships were disabled, commanders captured, fleets humiliated. And yet, the humans did not gloat. They did not celebrate. They allowed the gravity of the moment, the lesson delivered with patience and precision, to speak for itself. Every alien in the system understood now what the galaxy had learned repeatedly over centuries: humans were not to be underestimated, deceived, or betrayed. They were patient, cunning, and their response, when provoked, was absolute, precise, and emotionally overwhelming. Stories of the betrayal spread quickly. Across light years, whispers and reports carried the tale of the coalition that had dared to deceive humans, only to be turned against themselves. Observers marveled at the calm, precise, and devastating way humans had handled the treachery. Scholars noted the emotional impact of restraint, the terrifying weight of patience, and the inevitability of human response. And everywhere, repeated in awe and fear, the phrase rang true, "Now you've really pushed it." In the quiet corridors of human command, the lead officer watched the galaxy absorb the lesson. They understood the power of patience, the emotional weight of restraint, and the inevitability of response. Humanity had faced betrayal and had responded not with rage or chaos, but with precision, strategy, and emotional impact that no fleet, council, or species could ignore. The galaxy had learned again, through shock and awe, what it truly meant to provoke humanity. And far beyond the Veyrath system, across the stars and the void, the galaxy remembered. Humans were patient, cunning, and quietly terrifying. Betrayal was met not with recklessness, but with inevitable consequence. Every species that had doubted them, every fleet that had underestimated them, every council that had tried to manipulate them, had learned the same lesson. The galaxy had seen, yet again, that when humans said, "Now you've really pushed it," it was more than a warning, it was a declaration of inevitable consequence, precise, controlled, and unforgettable. The galaxy was on edge. The whispers of human patience, cunning, and precise fury had grown into a chorus of fear, awe, and cautious respect. Every fleet, every council, every planet had learned to hesitate when humans were involved. And yet, some could not accept this power. They could not accept that one species, so young, so seemingly fragile, could command the weight of the galaxy with nothing but intelligence, patience, and inevitability. These were the ones who gathered in secret, forming a coalition more massive than any the galaxy had ever seen. Thousands of ships, dozens of civilizations, each contributing their best commanders, their most advanced weapons, their greatest fleets. They called it the Grand Stand, a show of force meant to finally break humanity, to prove that even humans had limits. From orbit around a resource-rich world, the coalition prepared its assault. Ships gleamed like shards of metal under the light of a distant sun, weapons charged, shields active, fleets bristling with power designed to overwhelm any opposition. Every commander believed in their numbers, in the superiority of their tactics, in the inevitability of human submission. They believed humans would crack under pressure, that the young species would falter, that patience could not withstand the weight of overwhelming force. They were wrong. Below, humans moved as one. Civilians continued their daily lives without panic. Soldiers and pilots trained for decades coordinated silently. Engineers monitored and reinforced every system. The calm was total, but beneath it lay the depth of centuries of experience, adaptation, and preparation. Every observation, every pattern, every possible strategy of the coalition had already been studied, calculated, and accounted for. There was no fear, no hesitation, no error. The coalition launched their first attack. Thousands of ships fired simultaneously, unleashing torrents of missiles, energy beams, and gravity disruptors. The galaxy expected chaos, destruction, screams, but the humans did not panic. Their orbital defenses absorbed and redirected assaults with precise calculation. Small, seemingly insignificant ships moved in patterns that confounded every sensor. Energy fields folded space subtly, guiding enemy fire into harmless trajectories, while simultaneously exposing the overconfidence of the attackers. The coalition's first strike, meant to cripple humanity, was neutralized before any human had fired a shot. The emotional impact was immediate. On board the flagship of the coalition, officers screamed, shouted, tried to reorganize, but every move was anticipated. Communication channels failed, weapons misfired, and formations dissolved. Every decision, every strategy, every expectation collapsed under the quiet, unyielding patience of humanity. The coalition, confident and arrogant moments ago, now faced a force that moved with perfect understanding, calm inevitability, and restrained fury. The human commander observed silently, their eyes scanning every holographic display, every ship, every fleet movement. They did not shout, they did not panic, they did not celebrate. Calm determination radiated from their presence, a weight that settled across every corner of the battlefield. This was the lesson humans had been teaching the galaxy since the first whispers of their power. Patience is not weakness, observation is not hesitation, and restrained fury is unstoppable. As hours passed, the coalition attempted to adjust. Ships maneuvered, commanders shouted orders, alien leaders tried to coordinate, but every adjustment was countered before it could take effect. Human pilots moved with precision, anticipating every trajectory, every tactic, every possible outcome. They were everywhere and nowhere at once, striking when necessary, diverting attacks before they happened, and maintaining perfect control over a battlefield that spanned thousands of kilometers of orbit. The emotional weight of human control crushed the coalition. They realized too late that their numbers, their weapons, their confidence, their strategies, all of it, was meaningless against a species that had mastered patience and precision. Every commander felt the sting of realization. Humans were not just strong, they were inevitable. And inevitability, when wielded calmly and intelligently, was far more terrifying than any fleet or weapon. Then, as the coalition attempted a desperate retreat, the human commander transmitted a single message across every communication channel: "Now you've really pushed it." The words hung in space like a tangible force. Fleet officers froze. Alien soldiers and commanders felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. The phrase carried centuries of history, training, observation, and inevitability in its weight. It was calm, controlled, emotional in its impact, and devastating in its clarity. The coalition, already shaken by failed attacks and chaos within their ranks, realized fully that they were trapped in a battle they could never win, against a species they had underestimated at every turn. Human ships moved silently, invisibly, but with perfect coordination. Traps were set, formations disrupted, retreat routes blocked. The coalition could not escape. Their own attacks were turned against them. Missiles detonated harmlessly, energy beams were reflected back at their source, and entire fleets vanished into controlled chaos that humans directed without emotion or haste. Every attempt to regroup was met with precision, every assumption of victory dismantled with patience. On the planet below, civilians looked up at the stars as though nothing extraordinary was occurring, unaware of the deadly ballet above them. Engineers reinforced shields, pilots flew intercepts, and soldiers maintained order, all with calm precision that seemed effortless. The human presence, patient and controlled, dominated the battlefield emotionally and strategically. The coalition's arrogance, fear, and despair were irrelevant. The humans had already won through inevitability. By the end of the confrontation, the coalition's fleets were decimated. Ships disabled, commanders captured, fleets scattered across space, their confidence destroyed. The humans did not celebrate. They allowed the galaxy to feel the weight of the moment, the emotional and psychological impact of being defeated by patience, strategy, and controlled fury. No fire, no chaos, no recklessness, only precision, calm, and emotional inevitability. Across light years, stories spread. Every observer, every fleet, every council learned the same lesson. Humans were patient, cunning, and terrifyingly precise. They did not need to act immediately. They did not need to use overwhelming force. They needed only to wait, to observe, and when provoked beyond endurance, to strike with the full weight of calculated inevitability. The galaxy whispered once more, across star systems and civilizations, "Now you've really pushed it." And somewhere, silently observing from beyond the battlefield, the human commander allowed a faint smile. The lesson had been delivered. Humanity had stood against the greatest coalition the galaxy had seen and had emerged unshaken, unbroken, and emotionally victorious. The galaxy would never again underestimate humans. They would never again assume patience was weakness or calm was passivity. Every species, every fleet, every mind now understood. When humans act, it is with inevitability, precision, and restrained fury. And when humans speak, "Now you've really pushed it," it is a warning and a promise that cannot be ignored. The galaxy held its breath. After the grandstand, after the betrayal, after every display of human patience and precision, the whispers had turned to awe, fear, and careful observation. Fleets that had once dared to challenge humanity now hesitated. Councils reconsidered every negotiation. Entire civilizations began to rethink their assumptions. And yet, there were still those who believed the humans could be pressured, cornered, or forced into submission. They were about to learn the full meaning of inevitability. The coalition that had survived the grand stand, battered, broken, and humiliated, regrouped far from human-controlled space. Their leaders, desperate to reclaim honor and resources, devised a plan of counterattack. This time, they believed they had learned from previous mistakes. They would strike simultaneously at multiple human colonies, splitting their forces to overwhelm defenses, cutting communication lines, and isolating each settlement to prevent reinforcements. Their calculations were meticulous. Their confidence, fragile but present, was reinforced by numbers. They believed humans could be beaten through coordination, force, and timing. They were wrong. Across human systems, the response was calm and precise. Fleet commanders observed coalition movements with quiet calculation, tracking every trajectory, every formation, every subtle shift in position. Humans anticipated each move, every possible outcome, and every reaction of the enemy. Civilian colonies were protected, shields reinforced, and small but highly advanced craft positioned strategically to intercept threats before the coalition even realized they were in range. Humanity did not panic. Humanity did not rush. They waited. Patience was their weapon, observation their armor, and inevitability their strategy. The first wave of the coalition advanced. Thousands of ships fired simultaneously, energy beams and missiles converging on human targets. The galaxy expected chaos, destruction, screams, but the humans did not flinch. Defensive systems activated with perfect timing, redirecting missiles, absorbing fire, and leaving attackers exposed to countermeasures that seemed invisible. Small human vessels, appearing almost magically, struck from angles the coalition had never considered, disabling engines, disrupting communications, and neutralizing weapons. The first wave crumbled before it had even begun. The emotional impact on the coalition was immediate. Officers shouted commands, recalculated strategies, and attempted desperate maneuvers, but the humans anticipated every reaction. Ships collided, formations broke apart, and panic spread like wildfire. Every attempt to regain control was met with precise counteraction. The humans did not act with anger, did not rely on brute force. They acted with calm inevitability that shattered morale and hope alike. From the bridge of the human flagship, the lead officer observed silently. There were no raised voices, no frantic orders, only a steady focus that radiated authority. They understood that every enemy commander was making mistakes born of fear, desperation, and underestimation. Every misstep was catalogued, every reaction anticipated. Humanity did not need to rush or attack recklessly. Every move of the enemy played into the inevitable outcome that humans had already calculated. As the coalition attempted a second wave, splitting their forces to attack multiple colonies simultaneously, the humans responded with flawless coordination. Orbital defenses reconfigured in real time, civilian transport evacuated through invisible safe corridors, and strike teams neutralized incoming threats before they reached critical points. Human craft moved with precision, appearing where they were needed most, disappearing where they were not, and striking exactly when the enemy was vulnerable. It was as though the humans were everywhere at once, omnipresent and unavoidable. The psychological and emotional impact on the coalition was devastating. Confidence dissolved into fear. Morale collapsed. Every commander felt the weight of inevitability pressing down on them. They had underestimated humanity once, twice, and now for the third time, and the consequences were absolute. Humans had taught the galaxy, again and again, that restraint was not weakness, that patience was power, and that fury, when released, was precise, devastating, and unavoidable. Then, across all communication channels, came the calm, deliberate voice of the human commander. Now you've really pushed it. The phrase carried centuries of strategy, patience, observation, and inevitability in a few simple words. Fleet officers froze, soldiers trembled, and entire civilizations watching from afar felt the weight of human resolve. It was not a threat shouted in anger, it was a statement of absolute certainty, an emotional declaration that every calculation, every fleet, every move had been anticipated and accounted for. The coalition realized, fully and finally, that their counterstrike had failed before it even began. Human ships moved with relentless precision. Small strike craft appeared where needed, shields expanded to absorb incoming fire, and orbital defenses redirected energy beams into the attackers themselves. Coalition ships were disabled, engines jammed, weapons neutralized. Entire fleets were trapped in controlled chaos orchestrated by humans who did not panic, who did not shout, who did not make mistakes. The counterstrike, meant to reclaim honor, instead became the demonstration of human inevitability that the galaxy had witnessed repeatedly but could never fully grasp. Civilians on the planets below observed nothing, going about their lives, unaware of the deadly dance above them. Engineers maintained power grids, pilots guided traffic, and soldiers coordinated movements with quiet efficiency. The human presence, calm, precise, and emotionally unshakable, dominated the battlefield. The coalition's arrogance, desperation, and fear were irrelevant. Humans had already won through inevitability, and the emotional weight of their restraint crushed the enemy without a single reckless act. By the end of the conflict, the coalition's fleets were shattered. Ships disabled, commanders captured, strategies obliterated. And yet, the humans did not celebrate. They allowed the lesson to speak for itself. Every species observing understood the same truth once again. Humans were patient, cunning, and unstoppable when pushed. They were not driven by emotion but by calculation, precision, and inevitable strategy. Their calm fury was more devastating than any weapon. Across the stars, the phrase echoed once more, whispered with fear and awe, "Now you've really pushed it." Every fleet, every council, every civilization learned it. Humans were no longer just another species. They were a force defined by patience, strategy, and precise, controlled response. When provoked beyond endurance, they acted with inevitability, and the emotional impact of that inevitability was absolute. In the quiet of the human flagship, the commander finally allowed themselves a faint smile. Humanity had met a counterstrike from the galaxy's combined fleets and had emerged unshaken, unbroken, and emotionally victorious. The galaxy had once again witnessed the weight of human patience, the inevitability of their strategy, and the terrifying clarity of their fury. Every species, every observer, every fleet would remember. When humans say, "Now you've really pushed it," it is not merely a warning, it is the promise of absolute, precise, and unavoidable consequence. The galaxy trembled. After countless battles, betrayals, and counterstrikes, every species had learned to fear humans, yet none truly understood the full depth of their power. They had faced humans in negotiation, in defense, in retaliation, and even in betrayal, but every encounter had been only a glimpse of what humanity could do when the moment demanded absolute precision. The reckoning was coming, and the galaxy could feel it in the silence between stars, in the tension of every fleet, in the whispered warnings that spread across light years. In the void of Seriphus, the largest coalition ever assembled gathered once again, fueled by desperation, pride, and fear of being forgotten. Thousands of ships from dozens of species formed a ring around human-controlled space, weapons bristling, energy beams humming, and defensive fields glowing with raw power. The leaders believed this would be the final test, a strike that would crush human resistance, break their patience, and finally teach the galaxy that no species, no matter how cunning or patient, could withstand overwhelming force. They were wrong. On the planets below, human colonies continued daily life with calm precision. Children played, traders exchanged goods, engineers monitored systems, and soldiers maintained patrols, all moving as one. The calm was deceptive. It was not ignorance. It was not distraction. Every human had trained for this moment for decades, even centuries in the minds of planners and historians. They had studied coalition tactics, predicted formations, and anticipated weaknesses with perfect accuracy. They did not rush. They did not panic. They waited, understanding that true power lay in patience, in observation, and in responding at the precise moment when inevitability could no longer be avoided. The coalition launched their first assault. Thousands of ships opened fire, energy beams tearing through space, missiles streaking like deadly comets. The galaxy expected chaos and destruction. Instead, humans moved with flawless coordination. Orbital defenses activated with perfect timing, neutralizing incoming attacks, redirecting enemy fire, and leaving attackers exposed. Small human craft appeared from seemingly nowhere, striking at critical points in the enemy formation, disabling engines, weapons, and communications. Every attack was anticipated, every strategy countered, every expectation shattered. The emotional weight on the coalition was immediate. Commanders screamed in frustration, fleets attempted desperate maneuvers, and officers recalculated strategy after strategy, yet every move was anticipated and nullified. Panic spread through the ranks like a virus. Every species involved realized too late that humans had studied, predicted, and understood their every action. Humanity's patience, far from weakness, had become their deadliest weapon. Their calm, far from passivity, had become the most terrifying force the galaxy had ever witnessed. From the bridge of the human flagship, the lead commander watched silently, eyes scanning every movement, every fleet, every potential weakness. There was no shouting, no anger, no reckless orders, only unwavering focus. Every coalition mistake, every hesitation, every miscalculation fed the human strategy. They did not need chaos to win, they needed only inevitability. And inevitability, when wielded with precision and control, was absolute. Hours passed. Coalition ships faltered, formations crumbled, and entire fleets became trapped in gravitational fields and energy nets so precise they seemed impossible. Missiles exploded harmlessly in empty space. Weapons turned against their own fleets. Communications failed. Commanders realized that every tactic they had prepared for months, every plan designed to crush humanity, had already been anticipated. They had underestimated the one species whose patience could see centuries ahead, whose intelligence could measure probabilities with flawless accuracy, whose restraint concealed fury of unimaginable precision. Then, at the critical moment, the human commander spoke across the entire battlefield, calm and clear, words that carried centuries of strategy, patience, and emotional inevitability. Now you've really pushed it. The phrase hit every species like a shockwave. Officers froze mid-command. Soldiers and crews trembled. Even fleets watching from a distance felt the weight of inevitability pressing down upon them. It was not a threat shouted in anger. It was not panic. It was a statement of absolute certainty. Humans had anticipated every betrayal, every attack, every arrogance, and now the consequence could not be avoided. The galaxy understood, viscerally and emotionally, that the humans' response would be perfect, calculated, and devastating. Human ships moved with silent precision, striking where the enemy was weakest, protecting civilian populations without hesitation, and exploiting every misstep of the coalition with ruthless accuracy. Entire fleets were immobilized without a single reckless act from the humans. Coalition ships collided, weapons jammed, energy fields backfired, and commanders realized in horror that their massive armada had no escape. Every attempt to regroup, every calculated strike, every assumed advantage had been accounted for and nullified. The humans' patience had become inevitability. The humans' calm had become unstoppable force. On the planets below, Civilians noticed nothing, unaware of the full scope of devastation above. Engineers and soldiers maintained the same calm precision, while pilots guided intercepts with flawless timing. The emotional impact of human control spread beyond the battlefield. The coalition was humiliated, demoralized, and utterly defeated, not through chaos or anger, but through calculated patience, precision, and inevitability. Every species observing understood the lesson. Humans were not just fighters, not just survivors, they were unstoppable when pushed. Their fury was quiet, controlled, and absolute, and it was devastating. By the end of the engagement, the coalition's fleets were shattered. Ships were destroyed or disabled. Commanders were captured. Strategies that had seemed unassailable were turned against their creators. And yet, the humans did not celebrate. They allowed the moment, the emotional weight of inevitability, and the lesson delivered through patience and precision to speak for itself. The galaxy had learned once again, with fear and awe, that humans were patient, cunning, and unstoppable when provoked. Across systems, the phrase echoed in fear and reverence, "Now you've really pushed it." Fleet commanders, diplomats, scholars, and civilians alike understood that humans were no longer just a species, they were the measure of inevitability, patience, and controlled fury. Any action against them would be met not with reckless rage, but with precise, flawless, and devastating consequence. The human commander finally allowed a faint smile, knowing the reckoning was complete. Humanity had faced the greatest coalition the galaxy could assemble and had emerged unshaken, unbroken, and emotionally victorious. Every species, every fleet, every mind would remember this day. Patience was strength. Calm was power. Inevitable fury was terrifying. And humans, the galaxy now understood, had mastered it all. The galaxy was changed forever. After the grand stand, the betrayal, the counterstrike, and the reckoning, every species understood the same terrifying truth. Humans were not to be underestimated, not to be provoked, and not to be judged by appearances alone. They had seen patience transform into inevitability, calm turn into precision, and restraint reveal itself as the most devastating force the galaxy had ever known. Yet even now, few truly comprehended the depth of human strength, intelligence, and emotional resolve. From the furthest edges of known space, stories traveled faster than fleets ever could. Scholars and diplomats recorded events with trembling hands. Fleet commanders whispered warnings that would echo across star systems. Civilians shared tales of humans who had faced impossible odds, who had been betrayed, attacked, and overwhelmed, and had emerged unshaken, unbroken, and utterly victorious. It was no longer legend. It was history, written in the silence after explosions, in the shadows of ruined fleets, and in the awe of those who survived to witness it. On a small human colony orbiting a sun that had burned for billions of years, children played in parks unaware of the battles above. Engineers maintained power grids, farmers tended crops, and civilians moved about daily life as if the galaxy had not witnessed a war unlike any other. And yet, beneath that calm surface, humanity thrived not by force alone, but by understanding, preparation, and an unwavering commitment to protect life while asserting inevitability. Every citizen, soldier, pilot, and leader had played a role in shaping the moment the galaxy would never forget. The human flagship drifted silently above the battlefield, its crew calm, focused, and unshaken. The lead commander gazed at the holographic map, seeing the remnants of the shattered coalition fleets. There was no celebration, no arrogance, no gloating. Humanity did not need to prove itself through chaos or emotion. Their victory lay in patience, in foresight, in the quiet and precise orchestration of inevitability. Every ship, every maneuver, every calculated strike had delivered a lesson to the galaxy. Humans did not act recklessly, but when provoked beyond patience, their response was absolute. Across the stars, the phrase echoed once more, whispered by fleets, councils, and civilizations alike, "Now you've really pushed it." It was no longer just words, it was a warning, a promise, and an acknowledgement of power. Every species that had once underestimated humans now understood the weight of patience, the authority of calm, and the inevitability of controlled fury. Scholars debated, fleets recalculated, and young commanders stared at the void, realizing that no matter how advanced or numerous they were, humans were a force beyond prediction, beyond arrogance, and beyond conventional understanding. In the aftermath, alien leaders attempted to rebuild their fleets, but the emotional impact of human precision and inevitability lingered like a shadow over every council. Commanders who had survived the battles carried memories of flawless strategy, of attacks anticipated and neutralized, of every betrayal turned against its perpetrators. They knew the lesson would stay with them for decades, perhaps centuries. Humanity had shown them that strength was not measured by numbers alone, that fury was not measured by aggression, and that patience, when combined with intelligence and resolve, was the deadliest weapon of all. Back on the human colony, civilians remained calm, unaware of how deeply the galaxy had been shaken. Soldiers, pilots, and engineers had long understood the emotional weight of their actions. They had trained for moments like these, learned from history, and carried the knowledge that restraint, observation, and precision could achieve what brute force never could. Humanity's victory was complete, not in destruction, but in clarity, in inevitability, in the lesson delivered without chaos, without panic, without error. The lead commander allowed a faint, almost imperceptible smile, knowing that the galaxy had absorbed the truth. Humans had faced every threat, every betrayal, every overwhelming force the galaxy could muster, and had prevailed not through arrogance, rage, or luck, but through patience, precision, and controlled inevitability. The galaxy had learned, through fear, awe, and emotion, that humanity was unlike any species before. They were not merely survivors. They were strategists, thinkers, protectors, and warriors, their fury restrained, their intelligence unmatched, and their presence unavoidable. From the farthest reaches of space, messages traveled to every civilization, recounting the lessons of humanity. Stories of calm dominance, strategic brilliance, and emotional weight became teaching tools, legends, and warnings. Humans were no longer just a species, they were a standard, a measure, and a force that would forever define the boundaries of possibility in the galaxy. Every fleet, every council, every citizen now understood that provocation came with consequences that could not be ignored, anticipated, or mitigated. Humans were inevitable. And as the galaxy slowly absorbed the lesson, the phrase echoed again, more powerful than ever, "Now you've really pushed it." It carried centuries of preparation, strategy, patience, and emotional intelligence. It was not anger, not chaos, not raw power, it was humanity itself, calm, controlled, precise, and utterly unstoppable when provoked. The legacy was complete. The galaxy would never again underestimate humans. Every fleet, every planet, every species would remember their patience, their cunning, their inevitability. The humans had shown that strength was measured not by size or technology, but by foresight, restraint, and emotional clarity. They had taught the galaxy that when pushed beyond patience, humans acted with precision, inevitability, and devastating control. And the galaxy would never forget the lesson, whispered across star systems and generations alike, "Now you've really pushed it." The humans continued their work, their daily lives, their quiet vigilance. The galaxy had seen their power, but it had not yet seen the full extent of humanity's potential. Patience was their shield. Observation was their sword. Inevitable action was their force. And somewhere, silently, in the quiet of human command centers, the lead officer knew that the galaxy had learned its lesson, and that humanity's legacy had only just begun.